I talked at the top of the program about how stock markets had surged back because Donald Trump had now pressed a 90-day pause on his tariff war. In Australia, the market was up almost 5%. That's adding $100 billion worth of value to the Australian share market. Well, it's early in London, but as you know, the market opens early there. Already the market is up 5% in London. So Lord knows how many hundreds of billions of pounds of extra value that has added to the stock market. Let's cross to London live now and catch up with former Foreign Minister Alexander Downer. Alexander, it's just incredible to see what Donald Trump, the value he can strip from the stock markets around the globe. One moment, it comes surging back when he hits pause.
It's come somewhat back, but it hasn't come back to where it was originally. I think we're only halfway through this process, so there will be a lot of volatility on markets in the short term, and not just volatility on the share market, but importantly, volatility on the bond market. I was talking to a fund manager this morning over a coffee here in London. And, the sense of the fund managers is this is not a time to invest. We're just not going to invest. We're putting all investment on hold while we wait to see what will happen. And what will happen is that there will be a whole series of negotiations between the United States and their trading partners. But the 10% tariff is apparently still going to remain as the base tariff. And then, the trade war with China, the second biggest economy in the world, is going to go on for some time as well. So I suspect volatility is what we can look forward to, not a settling of the markets at a much higher level.
No, absolutely. That's the extraordinary thing about it. There's such great volatility. And, of course, we haven't seen a situation like this before where it's really dictated by the whims of this one politician, obviously the leader of the free world. But such a firm hand on his tariff strategy last week, pausing it now. As you say, a 10% tariff really across all countries going into the US now, except for China, where there are... They're basically competing with each other now, slapping on higher and higher tariffs. This is really the core of the issue, isn't it? The US versus China when it comes to trade. And what do you expect to unfold here? Because China obviously is retaliating strongly.
Yes, I think they'll enter into negotiations as soon as possible because this is doing both economies as well as the world economy quite a lot of damage. There's one other factor to take into account because the media focuses almost exclusively on the share markets. But it's very important to look at what's happening in the bond markets. There seems to be some suggestion that the Chinese are selling out of US Treasury bonds. That is lending money to the Americans or to the American government. And that's led to a very big fall in bond prices and therefore a big increase in bond yields. And the US Treasury is apparently very worried about that. And this makes it more difficult for the Americans to borrow the money they need to borrow to fund their massive budget deficit and their huge pool of debt. So it's not simple, this. If you disrupt the global financial markets and trading markets, expect all sorts of unintended consequences to flow from it. I've always believed in economic rationalism and liberal markets, and this is not economically rational. This is irrational, and it's quite worrying. And it's not all over yet.
No, certainly is not. Let's have a listen to Donald Trump and what he said about China.
Nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it.
Yeah, he wants to make a deal. Just what that deal is, Lord knows. But this is the issue, isn't it, Alexander? That the US now, with Donald Trump, he needs to make a trade deal with all countries, including Australia. But we're going to be a long way down the list when he's trying to sort out deals with China and with the European Union. So, and no one knows what's going to happen at the end of this 90 days. Presumably, the 90 days is there for him to try and start negotiating most of those deals.
Exactly. I assume that without being absolutely certain that the 90 days is all about the period during which the negotiations will take place. But you've got to remember that 10% tariff rate, base rate, is going to remain in place. So that's not part of the negotiation. So looking at it from Australia's point of view, there's the 25% tariff on steel and aluminium, but on the other hand, we don't sell much steel and aluminium to the United States, so that's not going to have major economic consequences. But the 10% on the face of it is just going to remain there. And, you know, that to be as one of the people who negotiated the Australia-US free trade agreement in the noughties, it's pretty depressing to see that. But remember, President Trump isn't the first US president to have imposed a 10% tariff. President Nixon did the same thing. And eventually they had to abandon that policy because of the chaos it caused.
We will see. Strap ourselves in. Big turnaround today, but a lot of uncertainty to come. Thanks for joining us, Alexander.